Let's begin with the foundation: data ingestion and transformation. On the left side of this slide, the code uses yfinance and NumPy to download adjusted closing prices and then compute log returns. Log returns are calculated by taking the logarithm of today's price divided by yesterday's price. Why do we do this? Because raw prices are not directly comparable across stocks. A $10 change means something very different for a low-priced stock than for a high-priced one. Log returns normalize those price histories into additive, comparable units. On the right, you can see the resulting data frame with tickers like Apple, Microsoft, JP Morgan, and ExxonMobil arranged across columns and dates down the rows. So this is the first practical lesson. Before we can build a network, we need a clean time series table where each column is a stock and each row captures return behavior on a given date. Now we compute the dense web, the correlation matrix. The heat map on this slide shows pairwise correlations among stocks across sectors such as technology, financials, and energy. You might notice how darker blue or red blocks indicate stronger relationships, while pale cells suggest weaker ones. The important point written on the slide is that the raw market is a dense web. Every asset correlates with every other asset, but not all of those connections are economically meaningful. That is a crucial insight. A full correlation matrix is mathematically complete, but as a network it is too crowded. Still, it tells us something useful already. Stocks from the same sector often appear in visibly tighter blocks, which hints at sectoral communities. So at this stage, we have not yet built a sparse graph. We have built the raw similarity structure from which that graph will be extracted. The next key step: finding the signal through thresholding. On the left, the heat map now contains only a smaller set of retained cells, and on the right we see the sparsity rule written explicitly. The logic is simple. Keep an edge only if the absolute value of correlation is greater than 0.5, and otherwise set it to 0. In words, we are saying that weak relationships should not count as meaningful links in the final network. The note at the bottom says this removes about 85% of connections, which is a huge reduction. And that is exactly the point. A useful network often comes from disciplined subtraction. Think of it this way: the raw market is full of statistical chatter, but thresholding lets us keep only the stronger co-movement patterns. This is the moment where a dense market similarity matrix begins to turn into an interpretable topology. Here we see the translation from matrix to graph. On the left is the sparse adjacency matrix after thresholding. In the middle is the NetworkX constructor, shown as nx dot from numpy array, and on the right is the resulting graph object. This slide is very helpful because it connects the mathematical representation to the computational object. The sparse matrix stores which stock pairs remain connected. The constructor reads the non-zero entries and converts them into a graph, where each node is a ticker and each edge represents a surviving strong correlation. The summary at the bottom makes it concrete. The input is a sparse adjacency matrix, the function iterates over non-zero indices, and the output is a graph object with nodes and retained correlation edges above the threshold. So this is the exact point where a numerical table becomes something we can visualize and analyze using graph algorithms. Now that the graph exists, we can ask what shape the market has. This slide introduces force-directed layouts, specifically the Kamada-Kawai layout. The large image on the left shows stocks arranged into colored clusters, and the text on the right explains the physics intuition. The algorithm treats edges like springs. Stocks that are strongly connected pull toward one another, while unrelated ones push apart to minimize energy. That is a beautiful idea because it turns abstract relationships into spatial structure. Notice how the graph naturally separates into groups. This is not because the data was manually sorted into sectors on the picture. It is because the topology itself is producing geometric organization. So a force-directed layout is not just decorative. It is a way of letting the structure reveal itself visually. Clusters, bridges, and outliers become much easier to spot once the graph is arranged by relational tension. This slide deals with a very practical visualization problem: clutter. On the left, the before image shows cognitive overload. There are too many labels, and the structure is difficult to read because names overlap everywhere. On the right, after filtered labeling, only a small set of important nodes are labeled, such as Microsoft, JP Morgan, Apple, ExxonMobil, and Chevron. The result is dramatically clearer. The code hint at the bottom suggests a top threshold rule, where labels are drawn only for nodes above a degree cutoff. This is a great design principle. More labels do not necessarily mean more understanding. In fact, too many labels can hide the very topology we want students to see. So good network visualization involves selective emphasis. We label the structurally important nodes and allow the broader shape of the network to remain visible. Now we begin formal analysis with degree centrality. The formula on the left defines it as the degree of a node divided by n minus 1, where n is the total number of nodes. That normalization makes scores comparable across graphs of different sizes. In the picture, large nodes like Microsoft, Apple, and Google sit near the center of a densely connected part of the network. The box on the right lists the top 3 by degree: Microsoft, Apple, and Google. What does that mean intuitively? These are stocks with many strong correlation links to others, so they belong to the market's synchronized core. The sentence at the bottom says it nicely: when they move, the market moves. In other words, high-degree stocks are not necessarily causal drivers, but they are deeply embedded in the market's main co-movement structure. That makes them important indicators of where collective behavior is concentrated. This slide moves from hubs to bridges by introducing betweenness centrality. The central node here is BlackRock, labeled BLK, positioned between 2 large groups. Betweenness centrality measures how often a node lies along the shortest path between other nodes. So unlike degree, which counts direct connections, betweenness captures brokerage or mediation. A stock or institution with high betweenness can serve as a gateway between clusters that would otherwise be more disconnected. The slide calls these nodes gatekeepers of volatility, and that is a strong phrase. It means that shocks, information, or synchronized movement may pass through these bridge nodes when traveling from one part of the market to another. So if degree tells us who is most connected, betweenness tells us who links separate worlds together. Both are forms of importance, but they capture different structural roles. Here we measure cohesion using the clustering coefficient. The diagram focuses on a node A and 2 of its neighbors, B and C. The local clustering coefficient asks a simple question. If A is connected to B and C, are B and C also connected to each other? In other words, do a node's neighbors form triangles? High clustering means the answer is often yes. The interpretation on the right is especially valuable. High clustering can imply apparently safer bull markets because local groups are tightly knit and internally reinforcing. But during crises, that same local cohesion can become a channel of systemic fragility, since shocks may circulate intensely inside these tightly connected groups. Think of it this way: triangles create redundancy, but they also create feedback loops. So clustering gives us a local measure of how cohesive and potentially how self-reinforcing a market neighborhood is. This slide offers a concrete interpretation of the network by highlighting the dominant technology cluster. On the left, the large blue cluster is boxed off visually, and the annotation points to high density plus high degree. That means this part of the graph is not only large, but internally very tightly connected. The key takeaway at the bottom is extremely important for finance. A portfolio that holds 5 different tech stocks may look diversified in a conventional list of holdings, but topologically, it is not very diversified if those assets all live inside the same dense cluster. This is a powerful lesson. Diversification is not only about counting different names, it is about understanding where those names sit in the network. If they move together strongly, the portfolio may still be exposed to one common structural risk. After analysis comes export and preservation. This slide shows 2 output modes. On the left is publication, which uses static files such as PDF or high-resolution PNG for academic papers, reports, or presentation slides. On the right is exploration, which uses interactive HTML for zooming, hovering, and filtering. The code examples capture the difference very nicely. One saves a static figure, while the other produces a browser-based interactive view. This distinction matters because the best format depends on the purpose. A paper needs a stable, polished image. An analyst exploring structure may need interaction to inspect nodes, communities, and local neighborhoods. So building the network is not the end of the workflow. We also have to think about how the network will be communicated and used by different audiences. We finish with a lab recap of the full construction workflow. The arrow sequence on this slide summarizes the entire lecture. Ingest log returns, filter with a correlation threshold above 0.5, build from matrix to graph, visualize using a Kamada-Kawai layout, and analyze with centrality metrics. This is an excellent closing summary because it shows that network construction is a pipeline, not a single command. Each stage depends on the quality of the one before it. If ingestion is flawed, the returns are flawed. If filtering is careless, the topology is noisy. If building is incorrect, the graph is misleading. And if visualization is poor, interpretation becomes harder. The sentence at the bottom says that we have successfully built a topological map of the S&P 500. That is exactly what this lecture accomplished. We took raw market data and turned it into a structural object that can now support deeper time series and systemic analysis in the next module.